Meet Sarah and John. From the outside, they look like the perfect couple. She's a brilliant mathematics professor, and he's a talented architect. They're happily decorating a nursery, eagerly counting down the days until their first child arrives. But beneath the surface, cracks are already forming. John's ex-girlfriend and coworker Alyssa is still lingering in his orbit, clearly not ready to let him go, even though John insists everything between them is ancient history. But real life doesn't care about perfect timing. While John is tied up with clients, his phone buzzing violently with missed calls, Sarah is at home alone, collapsing in agonizing pain. By the time John finally rushes to the hospital, it's too late. The baby is gone. The grief that follows is heavy and suffocating. Walking past that empty nursery every day becomes an unbearable torture, and Sarah realizes she can't breathe in this house anymore. They need a fresh start, but finding a place to heal is easier said than done. That is, until their realtor connects them with Emmett, an eccentric wealthy man who owns a historic, sprawling estate far out in the countryside. The house is a masterpiece, restored over a decade to absolute perfection, filled with priceless antiques and old-world charm. Emmett is a strange, overly hospitable host, feeding them drinks and entertaining them with bizarre party tricks until John is far too intoxicated to drive home. When they wake up the next morning, Emmett is completely gone. In his place, he's left a typed letter that changes everything. He is giving them the mansion, no rent, no mortgage, completely free. But the gift comes with a single bizarre condition. They must never ever open the cellar door. John's architect mind immediately flags this as too good to be true, smelling a trap. But Sarah, desperate to bury her grief and start over, begs him to take the deal. After all, they poured all their savings into failed IVF treatments. This house is their miracle. How hard can it be to just ignore one locked door? John gives in, the papers are signed, and they move into a life they could never otherwise afford. But a house bought with a secret never stays peaceful for long. During their housewarming party, Alyssa shows up, using the crowd as cover to corner John and try to seduce him. He rejects her coldly, but the tension is interrupted by something far more alarming. A frantic, disheveled man bursts onto the property, clutching a can of gasoline. He screams at the terrified guests, warning them that they need to burn the entire mansion to the ground before it destroys them. He vanishes into the night, leaving everyone shaken, but John and Sarah try to shake it off as just a local madman. If only they knew how right he actually was. The very next day, John's world begins to crumble. He arrives at work only to find he's been suspended because Alyssa filed a false harassment charge against him. Fearing Sarah's reaction, John keeps the suspension a secret, spending his days pretending to go out for long runs to clear his head. But being trapped in a house born of a mystery starts playing tricks on his mind. His gaze keeps drifting to that heavy locked cellar door. The urge to know what's inside becomes a burning obsession. He tries forcing it open with tools, but the lock won't budge. Driven by frustration, John decides to dig into the house's history. He visits the city archives to study the original blueprints, and what the clerk reveals sends a chill down his spine. Emmett wasn't the original owner. Decades ago, Emmett lived there with his wife and 5-year-old daughter until one night they vanished without a trace, never to be seen again. Studying the blueprints at home, John makes a thrilling discovery. There's a hidden crawl space behind the walls that bypasses the main cellar door. He crawls into the dark, claustrophobic tunnel, tracking it until he finds a heavily barricaded wooden barrier leading into the cellar. He begins drilling into the wood, his heart hammering against his ribs, desperate to peek through. But the distant sound of Sarah's car pulling into the driveway forces him to scramble back into the light just in time. That night, a frantic phone call from Alyssa pulls John into the dark. They meet in a shadowy underground parking lot, and the ugly truth finally comes out. John hadn't just been rejecting Alyssa, they had been having a passionate affair behind Sarah's back. Alyssa is furious, accusing him of lying about leaving his wife. When she threatens to blow his entire life apart by telling Sarah everything, John snaps, threatening to kill her if she ever steps foot near his wife. The next morning, while John is out on another one of his runs, Sarah experiences a wave of nausea. She takes a test and, looking down at the positive result, tears of joy fill her eyes. They're finally getting their second chance, but her happiness turns to ash when she discovers the hidden blueprints under the bed. Realizing what John has been doing, she walks down to the cellar and finds the marks where her husband has been trying to break through the door. Suddenly, she hears movement upstairs, but when she goes to check, the house is empty and the front door is wide open. Meanwhile, John is returning from his run when he spots Alyssa's car speeding away from the property. Panic setting in, he jumps into his own car, desperately chasing the vehicle down the winding roads. Late that night, John returns home, exhausted and anxious. Sarah breaks the news of the pregnancy, and for a moment, they are united in joy. But then she confronts him about the cellar, demanding to know if she can truly trust him. To prove his loyalty and protect their fragile new beginning, John takes heavy wooden planks and nails the cellar door shut for good. The next day, things seem to look up even more. HR calls to say the harassment charges have been dropped, and when John returns to the office, his boss mentions that Alyssa has suddenly taken a leave of absence for self-care. But the house isn't done with them. While updating the nursery, John discovers something horrifying lodged in the plaster: a bullet. He panics, connecting it to Emmett's missing family from 25 years ago, convinced Emmett murdered them and hid the bodies in the cellar. He wants to call the police, but Sarah fiercely shuts him down. She refuses to let his paranoia ruin the perfect life they are building. Reluctantly, John drops it. But the illusion of safety is shattered days later when John sees detectives at the office. Alyssa's car has been found abandoned. She is officially a missing person. The net begins to tighten. Two detectives show up at the mansion, questioning John about his past with Alyssa and his whereabouts on the day she vanished. They drop a bombshell. Alyssa's phone pinged near their house right before she disappeared. Just as John is about to crack under the pressure, Sarah steps into the room. With a calm, unwavering voice, she looks the detectives in the eye and lies, giving John a perfect alibi. Once the police leave, John tries to confess his affair, but Sarah stops him. She already knows. She found the texts and the emails. She tells him she didn't lie to save him, she lied to protect her unborn child. Tormented by guilt and convinced the answers to Alyssa's disappearance are locked beneath his feet, John tracks down Paul McManus, the man who owned the house after Emmett. The same madman who tried to burn it down. John finds him drowning his sorrows in a dingy apartment. Paul warns him that the house lures you in with the promise of a perfect life, but slowly rots everything you love from the inside out. He tells John to open the cellar, but mocks him, saying he isn't ready for what's truly down there. Driven to the brink, John rushes back to the mansion, grabs a crowbar, and attacks the boarded-up cellar door. Sarah screams at him to stop, throwing her body in front of the wood. A violent struggle breaks out between husband and wife. In the chaos, John drops the crowbar. Before he can react, Sarah snatches it up and strikes him across the face, knocking him out cold. When John finally groans awake on the living room couch, the room is dimly lit. Sarah is sitting nearby, completely calm. She looks at him and softly says she couldn't let him open that door. Then, she slides a phone across the table. It's Alyssa's. In a chilling flashback, the real horror of that afternoon is finally unveiled. Alyssa hadn't just driven by. She had walked right into the nursery to confront Sarah, mocking her and claiming that John's love, the baby, and the mansion all belonged to her. Blindsided by the betrayal and consumed by a feral rage, Sarah drew an antique pistol from Emmett's collection and fired. When the bullet didn't instantly kill Alyssa, Sarah dragged her down, wrapping her hands around her neck and strangling the life out of her. She then dragged Alyssa's bloody corpse into the hidden crawl space, letting it drop into the sealed cellar. The person John had been chasing that afternoon wasn't his mistress. It was his wife, driving Alyssa's car to abandon it, using Alyssa's phone to send the fake time-off emails to buy themselves time. John sits there, paralyzed with horror. He tells Sarah he has to turn her in, promising he'll get her the best lawyers. But Sarah's eyes go ice cold as she pulls out the gun and points it directly at his chest. She explains that if he goes to the police, she will frame him for the entire thing. After all, John was the one with the motive, the one suspended for harassment, and the one who personally nailed the cellar door shut. If he tries to leave, she will tell the police he killed Alyssa and that she only shot him in self-defense. But there's an alternative. If he chooses to stay silent, they can raise their child and live out the beautiful, wealthy life they always dreamed of. It's just a small sacrifice for a perfect family. Weeks later, the mansion is filled with bright balloons, laughter, and guests celebrating a beautiful baby shower. John stands in the center of the room, smiling tightly, holding his wife. He made his choice. Among the gifts, they find a letter from Emmett, thanking them for breathing life back into the estate. Taped to the letter is a silver key, the key to the cellar door. Emmett writes that whether they choose to use it is up to them, but he notes that he's certain they already know exactly what kind of evil is locked inside. If you were handed the keys to your dream life, but it required covering up a horrific crime to keep it, would you walk away? Or would you lock the door and pretend the screams beneath the floorboards were just the wind? Thanks for watching.